WWE's speculative foray into the world of reality television helped produce a lasting concept that may have morphed and changed throughout the years and had a patchy record when it came to success, but the concept remained the same. Tough Enough was all about hopefuls, mostly regular people who had grown up as fans of wrestling, trying to win a WWE contract and live their dreams as fully fledged superstars. Despite thousands of people sending in tapes and trying out, only a select few made it onto the show, fewer won the competition, and fewer still went on to become stars in the biz. So just what happens to someone after they appear on a popular wrestling-themed reality show? Roll the intro. Mason Ryan, Stevie Ray, Earthquake, Alundra Blaze, Norman Smiley, Zach Gowen, Bam Bam Bigelow, Ahmed Johnson, Tory Wilson, Buff, Bagwell, Robert Gibson, Dave Taylor, Terry Taylor, and Godfather's Holmes. Dwayne Gill, Adam Bomb, Michael Hayes, Cor Von, S.A. Rios, Jim Manai, the manager from Kai and Tai, Jim Powers, Francine, Jack Swagger, Mean Gene, Fat Chick Thriller, Duke the Dumpster, Oklahoma Manta. What happened to that wrestler? Some were main eventing, which leaves me lamenting. What happened to that wrestler? Some since long forgotten, but their memories live on. Season 1, Bobbie Jo Anderson. Bobbie Jo Anderson turned heads in the casting episode by saying that she wasn't originally going to send in an audition tape, that her brother did it for her, and that her real goal was to pose for Playboy because she loves TNA. I'm sure Test and Albert would love you too. Anyway, Bobbie Jo quit in episode 4 because she couldn't handle the physicality of the training. I have the unfortunate responsibility of telling you that she never got to pose for Playboy. I checked every single issue of the magazine from 2001 onwards just to make sure. These days, Bobbie Jo O'Brien is married with children and lives in Sandwich, Massachusetts, where she runs a home daycare business. Yes, Sandwich is a funny name for a place. Chris NIFONG. Poor Chris NIFONG, who wanted to be a WWE superstar more than anything, but got the nickname CK, aka Career Killer, after injuring WWE star and Tough Enough trainer Tori with a hip toss. He actually signed with WWE Developmental Territory Ohio Valley Wrestling later, but gave up the dream in favor of a more normal life. These days he works in graphic design, but also still loves the graps and has done some training at the AML Pro Wrestling Training Center in his native North Carolina. Christopher Nowinski. Christopher Nowinski was one of the standouts of Season 1, and though he didn't win, WWE signed him up and sent him to Louisville, Kentucky for further training anyway. He made his way to WWE television shortly after, but sadly a promising career was cut short due to post-concussion syndrome. The Harvard graduate has dedicated his post-WWE career to looking into the effects of concussions in sports and has done groundbreaking work on the subject of CTE. He is the co-founder and CEO of the Concussion Legacy Foundation. Darryl Cross. Darryl Cross didn't make a good impression on the coaches, least of all Al Snow, who told Darryl he smelled like a horse. He was eliminated in episode 5 after failing to keep up with the training and displaying a poor attitude. Nowadays he works in graphic design and is also a freelance photographer. Greg Whitmoyer. Greg wasn't about to let being forced to quit in episode 9 due to 3 herniated discs in his back make him give up on his pro wrestling dream. Once recovered, Whitmoyer worked for promotions like CZW, WXW, and even Ring of Honor as Greg Matthews between 2001 and 2010. Today, he runs Apex Pro Pest Solutions in Pennsylvania. Jason Debris. Jason was the first contestant to leave the show, quitting because he couldn't handle the road life. He was a professional bodybuilder for a bit and is now married with kids. He also runs a fitness and gaming YouTube channel called PE Superstars. You're welcome for the plug, Jason. Josh Lomberger. Josh was one of Season 1's runners-up. Better known as Josh Matthews, he was signed by WWE and had a long career as a backstage interviewer and broadcaster. Since 2014, he's worked for TNA/Impact in various roles. He is married to Impact star Madison Rayne. Maven HUFFMAN. Co-winner of Season 1 Maven wrestled for WWE between late 2001 and the summer of 2005 when he was released. He had some highlights in those 4 or so years, chief among them the time he shockingly eliminated The Undertaker from the Royal Rumble. Maven bounced around the indies and did some stuff with TNA after, but unfortunately fell into a spiral of addiction and got in trouble with the law. Thankfully, he turned it all around, and after doing a little of this and that, now works in finance on Wall Street. Nydia Gennard. The other co-winner of Tough Enough, Nydia, also had a couple of memorable years as an on-screen WWE character. She is best remembered for her partnership with on-screen boyfriend Jamie Noble, which led to a storyline where she was blinded and led to a match where she wrestled Noble in a blindfold match on pay-per-view. Her WWE career sadly fizzled out soon after, and after dipping her toes into the independent and international scenes, she decided to get out and retrain as a chef. These days, Nydia is married with kids and living in Texas. Paulina Thomas. The judges were high on Paulina, who was tall, strong, and possessed a unique look that would have fit right in at the time. Regrettably, she suffered some fairly severe injuries in episode 2 and had to leave in episode 7. Post Tough Enough, Paulina actually showed up in very early day TNA as Disco Inferno's bodyguard for a couple of shows, but hasn't done anything else in the business since. She is currently a senior marketing manager for Pajunk Medical Systems in Atlanta. SHADRICK McGee. SHADRICK McGee, which sounds suspiciously like a 1980s jobber name if you ask me, was cut in episode 6 after failing to keep up with the rest of the class in the ring. He supposedly continued to train and wrestle on the independent circuit for a while doing some matches in Texas, which Al Snow encouraged him to do, but it didn't lead to anything, and I haven't got a clue what he's up to nowadays. Sorry. Taylor Matheny. One of Season 1's runners-up, Taylor worked on the indies for a few years before deciding to pursue a career as a makeup artist. She's married to former WWE star Brian Kendrick and helps him run his training school and his wrestling pro wrestling promotion, where she plays the character Mean Janine. Victoria Tabor. Victoria quit the show alongside Bobbie Joe in episode 3 because she couldn't handle the physicality of the training. She's now a stay-at-home mother of 3. A former nurse, she is also an independent consultant for skincare brand Rodan and Fields. Season 2, Aaron Lewis. Aaron, a high school classmate of Season 1 winner Maven, oddly enough, was the first person cut after getting so exhausted while exercising on the beach that he passed out. He now works in medical devices for Afatech Spine. Alicia Martin. Scrappy, smoky-voiced Alicia was bit by the injury bug and had to withdraw her participation in episode 7. Tragically, she died a few years after the show aired in 2005 at the age of just 21. Annie King. Big, tall, and strong, Annie was cut after being deemed too hesitant to be in the ring. She had 2 matches post Tough Enough, both in her native California, before giving it up. After wrestling, Annie started a business selling outdoor fitness equipment with her father. Danny Carney. The man who was pushing 5'10", in his own words, certainly had the right name for wrestling. Carney, eh? But he lacked the necessary personality and was cut in episode 5 after bottling it while cutting a promo. He wrestled on the indie scene after, including for Jersey All-Pro Wrestling, but didn't do too much of note besides briefly crossing paths with a pre-WWE Damian Sandow. Danny is currently living in Boston, where he is an account executive at Conversica. Hawk Younkins. The self-professed master of ADHD voluntarily left the show in episode 11 because he didn't think that he had what it took in the ring. He certainly had plenty of personality and did wrestle a bit afterwards for indie promotions like UPW. Since Tough Enough, he's done some acting, dabbled in MMA, including event commentary, and is involved in film and TV production. Jackie GAYDA. Controversially, the co-winner of Season 2, controversial because the contestants believed that 1 man and 1 woman would receive a WWE contract, not 2 women, Jackie GAYDA's stay in the house was also packed with incidents as she was shown cheating on her boyfriend with Pete. Having been cut from the final 25 in Season 1, GAYDA must have been thrilled to co-win the contest on that second try, but also must have been mortified when she was thrown on live TV and had that match with Trish Stratus, Christopher Nowinski, and Bradshaw. Still, she stuck at it and had decent runs in WWE and then TNA. She was married to and has 4 children with Charlie Haas, and they are now divorced. She remarried and is no longer involved in the business. Jake Sokoloff. The firefighter with the funny hair, who looked a bit like prototype-era John Cena, Jake was positively apoplectic at the finale reveal, as he was sure that he was going to win, and WWE even teased as much before announcing Jackie. Sokoloff is now a broker and CEO of Gold Standard Realty in Bakersfield, California. Jesse Ward. Jessie had a lot of promise and could have actually gone on to win the whole thing had she not been diagnosed with a heart condition that prevented her from getting beyond episode 7. She credited the show with potentially saving her life and even worked for WWE as a stage manager for a couple of years after. Ward then worked for TNA as an assistant director for a few years before leaving and becoming a television producer working on shows like Big Brother. Her connection to the business hasn't ended, however, as she's married to and has one daughter with WWE star Tommaso Ciampa. Kenny Lane. Kenny Lane, no relation to WCW's Lenny, was one of the standouts of Season 2, at least from an athletic standpoint. He was probably the best in the ring and made it to the Final Four, where he was also bamboozled by the 2 female winners Swerve. Lane took it better than Jake, that's for sure, and didn't let the setback derail his wrestling hopes. As Kenny King, he has wrestled all over the United States and around the world for companies like TNA/Impact, Ring of Honor, and CMLL. He's also shown up on reality TV series such as The Bachelorette. Linda Miles. Co-winner alongside Jackie GAYDA, Linda Miles, or Hot Mocker as she kept referring to herself during the show, had, as JR would say, a lot of upside. Namely her athletic background, age, and look. Miles is best remembered as the leather-clad dominatrix manager of the Basham Brothers. Her time in WWE was fraught, however, as she ended up leaving the company in late 2004 following reports that she had a bad attitude. She left the business and is now a college basketball referee. Matt Morgan. The massive Morgan, who had been one of the favourites based purely on his size and positive attitude, had to leave the show in episode 6 after getting injured. WWE signed him up anyway, and he served his time in OVW before being called up for a couple of short, unimpressive stints. First as one of SmackDown general manager Paul Heyman's heavies, then as the stuttering bodyguard of Carlito. He had much more success during his post-WWE TNA run though. The Blueprint is now retired from the industry and involved in local politics. He serves as District 4 City Commissioner of Longswood, Florida, and is a former mayor. Pete Tornatore. Pete made it all the way to episode 12 before the judges decided that he wasn't quite cutting the mustard as far as his work in the ring went. As well as getting cozy with Jackie in a hot tub, the most memorable thing about Pete was that he had a tattoo of the Italian flag. Backwards. Mamma mia! Or should that be ma'am? Anyway, Tornatore now works in construction management. Robert SAVHALET. Big Rob was the second person cut in episode 3 because he struggled with the physicality in and out of the ring. His story living on the streets with his mother and sister after they found themselves homeless touched the judges' hearts. Unfortunately, despite my best efforts, I have absolutely no idea what the bloke is up to today. I just hope he's okay. Season 3, Chad Angeli. We said goodbye to Chad in episode 4. He was cut because he couldn't keep up with the rest of the group. Since the show, he's been working for a cleaning products company called Tennant. He's worked his way up to become North American Director of Industrial Sales. Eric Markovcy. Athletic and likeable Eric was one of the runners-up of Season 3, and while WWE initially expressed an interest in signing him up, it didn't quite pan out. Since 2004, he's worked for Lee University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. He's currently the Director of Strength and Conditioning in the Athletics Department and is married with 2 kids. Jamie Burke. One of the other runners-up was Jamie, who was selected for the final lineup ahead of future WWE Women's Champion Melina, who also tried out. She was voted out by viewers during the live finale. She's currently a sales representative at Sherwin-Williams in her native Oregon. Jill. We didn't get long to enjoy the lovely Jill, who was dating fellow contestant Jonah, as she quit after the first day. She had a shot given her personality and athleticism, but clearly couldn't hack the physicality of the training and was subsequently branded a quitter by the trainers. Again, despite my best efforts, I can't find out what Jill is up to now. Hope you're good, Jill. John Hennigan. After failing to make the final cut when auditioning for Season 2, Hennigan was accepted in Season 3 and went on to be co-winner of the competition. Since then, he's wrestled as Johnny, well, everything for WWE, Impact, Lucha Underground, and beyond. He's a former ECW champion, a multi-time Intercontinental champion, and tag team champion. He is by far the most successful Tough Enough winner ever. Jonah Edelman. Big Jonah was, after John and Matt, the star of Tough Enough Season 3, noted for his participation in ribs, and the one most felt likely to be someone in the business due to his look and natural charisma. It didn't quite work out that way, though he did do a handful of indie shows in the year after Tough Enough. He wrestled Mike Sanders on a TNA pay-per-view and also worked a WWE dark match tagging with Chad Wicks of the Dicks fame against Sean O'Hare and Shannon Moore. Not too long into his wrestling career, Jonah got into taking and dealing the drug OxyContin, was ultimately sentenced to probation but managed to turn things around. These days, Jonah is a husband and father and works in recruitment as the president of his own company. Justin. Justin had a decent look and was clearly athletic, but the trainers booted him off the show in episode 11 because he lacked aggression and wasn't competitive enough. He did some indie shows afterwards on shows with fellow castmates Jonah and Scott Chong, but not much came of his wrestling career. Prior to Tough Enough, Justin was teaching autistic children at a school in Tampa, Florida. Kelly. Young and bearing a slight resemblance to beloved WWE star Lita, Kelly was likeable and had a lot going for her, but suffered from asthma attacks. Kelly also had a thing for fellow contestant Nick. She survived until episode 8 when she finally had to go home due to an injured back. And unfortunately, again, I can't find what she's up to now. Kelly, call me! Lisa. Now this is a story in and of itself. Lisa was in the show until episode 3 when she disappeared with the coaches saying that wrestling wasn't for her. In actual fact, Lisa had something of a psychotic breakdown, throwing herself into the walls of the house and breaking into the hidden MTV control room, amongst other things that were alleged to have happened. Lisa eventually made her way onto the roof of the house and had to be talked down by producers of the show before she was admitted to a hospital for psychiatric treatment. There was some dodgy stuff about her trying to get backstage at WWE shows and even showing up unannounced at OVW afterwards. I have no clue what ended up happening to Lisa, but wherever she is, I truly hope she's alright. Matt Cappotelli. Matt Cappotelli was the favourite of the 3rd season of Tough Enough. He was an athletic, likeable, charismatic kid who gained the sympathy of viewers after an infamous incident where he was roughed up by the cantankerous Bob Holly. Matt worked hard in OVW and was often rumoured to be on the cusp of a call-up, but his career was ended when it was discovered that he had a brain tumour. Afterwards, he became a trainer for OVW and then a personal trainer. Tragically, Cappotelli died of brain cancer in 2018 at the age of just 38. Nick Distelbrink. Nick had a decent look and could have possibly done better than he did, but was eliminated in episode 6 after suffering a bicep injury. He didn't pursue the sports entertainment dream much further, instead becoming a personal trainer before joining the 9-to-5 office world. He is currently a benefits advisor for Aflac. Rebecca. A sweet southern virgin. No, really. Devout Christian and then Hooters waitress. No, really. Rebecca left the show in episode 5 because of a family emergency back home. Since then, Rebecca seems to have vanished, so Rebecca, if you're watching this video, get in touch. Scott Chong. The oddball of the house, with the emotional maturity of an 8-year-old, according to Al Snow, who clearly secretly liked him quite a lot, Scott was eliminated in episode 7 because he couldn't keep up with the rest. He dabbled in the indies afterwards and even showed up in promotions like CZW and in early Ring of Honor as a member of Special K before leaving wrestling and pretty much dropping off the face of the earth. Season 4, Chris NOWROCKI. Chris NOWROCKI had the pleasure of getting some ribs broken by Kurt Angle in an impromptu wrestling match just before Daniel Puder gave the Olympic gold medalist the fright of his life. Chris was offered a WWE developmental deal but declined and went back to work on Wall Street as well as to do some acting work. Daniel Puder. MMA fighter Daniel Puder won the $1 million Tough Enough, then quickly found out that it was actually the $250,000 per year Tough Enough and that WWE were free to cut him loose after the first year, which they did. Puder gained infamy due to his shoot skirmish with Kurt Angle, which nearly resulted in the WWE star getting his arm snapped, and then was beaten to a pulp by a gaggle of angry veterans during the 2005 Royal Rumble. Post-WWE, he went on to work for New Japan and Ring of Honor, and went back to MMA, retiring with an 8-0 record. These days, he's involved in various endeavors, including MMA coaching, motivational speaking, leadership training, and youth outreach programs. Daniel Rodimer. Daniel Roddimer may not have won, but he was signed to a WWE developmental deal in 2006 and actually made a number of appearances on house shows, in dark matches, and on Sunday Night Heat. His last WWE match, believe it or not, was a non-televised world title match against John Cena. He was released in August of 2007 and sort of dropped off the map before re-emerging to try his hand at some Trumpian politics in 2018. Roddimer has lost in 3 separate elections now, twice in Nevada and then once in Texas, where, hilariously, he completely changed his accent and public image in order to appeal to voters in the Lone Star State. John MEYER Jr. Former Navy man John MEYER Jr., who looked like a beefed-up Steve Austin, was picked for the Final 8, but chose to withdraw from the competition early on after realizing that wrestling wasn't for him. He was in good shape, but the first day of bumping left him lying in a bathtub full of ice that he did not want to get out of. John is currently self-employed and lives in Michigan. Justice Smith. Justice had size, look, and charisma going for him, but it wasn't enough to stave off elimination. He was one of the few not offered a developmental deal afterwards, though he did have a few matches outside of WWE. In 2008, Smith joined the revival of the American Gladiators TV show as Justice. These days, the self-described family man does some acting, MMA training, and fitness coaching. Mike Mizanin. The biggest Tough Enough success story ever, Mike the Miz Mizanin may not have won the competition, finishing in second place behind Puder, but he's been with WWE going on 20 years now and is sure to be a future WWE Hall of Famer. Overcoming a rocky start in the company, Miz has gone on to establish himself as a dependable company man and has been rewarded in kind by winning every title going and even getting to main event WrestleMania opposite John Cena. Outside the business, he's done some acting and appeared on reality TV shows like Dancing with the Stars. He is married to and has 2 children with WWE star Maurice. The dog did okay, didn't he? Nick Mitchell. Despite being the first man eliminated from the final 7, Nick Mitchell was signed to a developmental deal anyway. After learning the ropes in OVW, he debuted as Mitch, a member of the Spirit Squad. He was released in May of 2007, dated Tori Wilson for a bit, and had an MMA fight, lost to future UFC knockout machine Derek Lewis. When the Spirit Squad reunited on WWE television in 2016, it was noted that Mitchell, who is deeply religious, now lives in Jerusalem, and while he has visited wrestling events in Israel, has no desire to compete. Ryan Reeves. The last to be voted off before the finals, Ryan Reeves nonetheless signed a WWE deal and reported to developmental, where he stayed for a good 5 years before getting his shot as a contestant on another reality show, the first incarnation of NXT, where he competed as Skip Sheffield. Injuries took him out of the Nexus fold early on, but he came back a couple of years later as Ryback. The big guy was hot for a minute there and had a good run for 4 or so years before leaving the company. Since then, the outspoken and often controversial Ryback has been in a legal war with WWE over the use of the Ryback name, has started a podcast, and has his own line of supplements. A return to the ring seems unlikely as he is now officially retired. Season 5, Andy Leavine. Big Andy was, unfortunately, a washout as a winner. After being announced as winner on Raw, he was slapped by Vince McMahon and stunned by Steve Austin, his lack of adequate selling subsequently becoming a big talking point. Released after less than a year in developmental, during which time he failed WWE's wellness policy, Leavine started working in Puerto Rico, where he became the WWC Heavyweight Champion. Silent Rage stopped wrestling in 2015 and has since joined the army. Luke Robinson. Runner-up Luke still wrestles occasionally on the independent scene. His full-time gig, however, is running his Wolfpack fitness business. A quick look at his social media accounts confirms that he enjoys taking pictures of himself wearing very little clothing. More power to you, Luke, you big buff bastard. Jeremiah Riggs. Jeremiah Riggs gave up a career in MMA in order to pursue wrestling and got far in Tough Enough Season 5, making it all the way to the second to last episode before being cut. He had been safe from elimination in every single episode until then. Post Tough Enough, he had a tryout at WWE Developmental Territory Florida Championship Wrestling, but was not offered a deal after reportedly rubbing people the wrong way. He then came out of retirement in MMA, but lost all 3 of his final fights for Bellator. Riggs has had more success recently in the world of bare-knuckle fighting. Christina Crawford. The younger sister of WWE star Alicia Fox, Christina was cut in episode 8 for not displaying the adequate level of charisma. She signed a developmental deal anyway and worked for FCW, where she was Divas Champion, and on NXT, but was released in August of 2012. She then did some indie shots as well as a tryout for TNA before starting work as a cheerleader for NFL team the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. These days, Christina is a real estate broker and model. AJ Kirsch. AJ was cut loose in episode 8, but he's been a busy man since, doing a bit of acting, commentating, hosting, and so on. Kirsch hosted a podcast called Tough Talk, which interviewed people associated with Season 5, including his fellow contestants. He also still wrestles, including doing some shots on AEW Dark and some WWE extra work as Brosif Joe Brody. Martin Cassos. One of the few in the competition to come with prior wrestling experience, Martin had to leave the show after a freak accident put him on the injured list. Before that, he had been one of the favourites. Post Tough Enough, he worked for Lucha Underground as Marty the Moth Martinez, and he's a former Lucha Underground champion. In 2021, Martin worked a few AEW Dark tapings, losing to Brian Cage, Jungle Boy, and Matt Sydal. On Twitter, he describes himself as a YouTuber and Twitcher, while also doing acting, stunts, and of course wrestling. Ivelisse Velez. Ivelisse sadly had to exit the competition in episode 6 after suffering an injury. Despite having to leave, Austin assured her that she belonged in the ring and had what it took to be a star, and you know something? Old Chili McFreeze was damn sure right. She's since worked for companies like Lucha Underground and AEW, but questions remain about her attitude. She was released from AEW after getting into an unscripted altercation with Thunder Rosa and has irked some of her peers with her comments. Ivelisse currently wrestles on the independent scene. Eric Watts. Not to be confused with WCW legend Eric Watts with a K, this Eric Watts, who was eliminated in episode 6 after it was deemed that he wasn't improving quickly enough, still wrestles. Over a decade on from trying to impress Stone Cold Steve Austin and crew, Watts is active on the indie scene and has even made appearances for Impact and AEW. Ryan Howe. Ryan caught the ire of trainer Bill DeMott, never a good thing, and was sent packing in episode 5 after consistently poor performances. He's been active on the indies since, doing a rock star gimmick, and presently calls Ohio Valley Wrestling his home. He is the current OVW heavyweight champion in his 3rd reign. Rima Fakih. Miss USA 2010 certainly added some glamour to the proceedings in Season 5, but she was slow to improve in the ring and was cut in Episode 4. These days, Rima is the national director of the Miss Universe Lebanon organization and works as a philanthropist and advocate. Michael Zaki. Michael was eliminated in Episode 3 after he was out-promoed by Ryan. He stuck around wrestling for a couple of years after and even did job duty for the Ascension on an episode of NXT in 2013, but has since left the business. Matt Capiccioni. Easily the most experienced contestant on the show, Matt Capiccioni is better known to wrestling fans as M-Dog20, Matt Cross, or Son of Havoc. Despite being a 10-year veteran by the time he appeared on Tough Enough, Matt was kicked off the show in episode 2 after it was deemed that he didn't use his experience to stand out from the rest of the pack. He's been regularly competing on the indie and international circuits ever since. Cross is also the creator of the Wrestling is Forever brand. Ariane Andrew. Ariane Andrew gained a degree of infamy for telling the Texas Rattlesnake that her favourite match of all time was an unspecified bout pitting Melina against Alicia Fox. That answer, as well as her general attitude to the competition, convinced Austin and the trainers that she didn't have the passion for the business, eliminating her first. She then signed with WWE and performed as Cameron until May 2016. Andrew has since wrestled once for AEW and returned to WWE in the 2022 Women's Royal Rumble. She has many outside ventures, including a fitness app, podcast, and music career. Season 6, Joshua Bredel. Well, this didn't end well at all, did it? He had the size and look of a WWE star, but Season 6 winner Josh Bredel put his foot in his mouth by putting his fingers on his phone and sending out a tweet that torpedoed his WWE career. Disliked by his colleagues and kicked out of the NXT locker room, Bredel was released in November 2017 after suffering a serious concussion. He's now a personal trainer in LA. Sarah Lee. Co-winner Sarah Lee never made it past developmental, getting released in September 2016. A mother of 3, she is married to former WWE star Wesley Blake. Amanda Sacamano. Runner-up Amanda was signed to a 5-year contract despite finishing in 2nd place. She continues to wrestle for WWE today as Mandy Rose and is the current NXT Women's Champion. Zamariah Lupe. One of the most memorable characters from any incarnation of Tough Enough, the dumb but lovable ZZ was the other runner-up, and he, like Mandy Rose, also received a developmental deal. Unlike Mandy, ZZ was released before he could make it to WWE TV. He is currently a swamp tour guide. Tanner Saraceno. Tanner the Hammer, or Andy Leavine 2.0 as I like to call him, was eliminated in episode 9. He ditched wrestling for MMA and since 2015 has amassed an 8-win, 6-loss record. Tanner also runs a tree removal service company called Tanner's Legendary Tree Services. Georgia Piscina. Australian Gigi was sent back down under after she was placed in the bottom 3 by Daniel Bryan and subsequently voted off. The kiss of death for Gigi, who had been one of the favourites to win the contest, was when she worked a practice match with Tanner as a heel when she was supposed to be a babyface. Since Tough Enough, Gigi is now modelling and has lots of pictures of herself in bikinis and underwear on her Instagram page. And if you like that sort of thing, then you go ahead and follow her like the other 139,000 other filthy little freaks. Chelsea Green. Chelsea was brought in as a replacement for Diana, who quit in episode 3. Green herself got to week 7 before she was axed. She then wrestled for Impact before signing with WWE and having some of the worst luck imaginable with injuries before being released in April 2021. Chelsea, who was married to Matt Zack Ryder Cardona, is currently killing it on the indie scene, does some modelling and runs an OnlyFans account. Mada Abdelhamid. Mada was angry at his Tough Enough elimination halfway through the show's run, since he'd performed well and seemed to have a lot of what WWE is looking for. He was signed to a developmental deal, but ended up requesting his own release a couple of years into it. Nowadays, he is a celebrity trainer, runs his own meal delivery company in LA, and is yoked out of his freaking mind. Patrick Clark. Patrick's elimination due to perceived cockiness was controversial, as he was probably the overall favourite to win the competition. He was signed to a WWE developmental deal anyway, and caught the world's attention as the Velveteen Dream in NXT. He looked to be a future megastar, as the gimmick was a winner and he seemed to improve with every appearance. Unfortunately though, Clark's time in WWE came to an end following some unsavoury allegations that came out against him in 2020. He denied the allegations but was released and doesn't look like returning to the business anytime soon. Gabby Castrovinci. Gabby finished 10th but continued her training with Florida's WXW before appearing in TNA as Raquel in 2016. She's no longer involved in wrestling, and on her Instagram page, which has a whopping 1 million followers, she describes herself as an aesthetic nurse injector, mother, and digital influencer. Daria Beranato. Daria was voted out in episode 3 but signed with WWE a few months later. A former mixed martial artist, Daria was rechristened Sonya Deville and still works for WWE as a wrestler and authority figure. She made history as the first openly gay female wrestler in WWE. Diana Dahlgren. Diana was the only competitor to quit the season, returning to Washington in order to help a friend who had gotten injured while working in the bar she owned. The 5-time Miss Supercross is now married with a son and is the co-owner of the Salty Honey clothing brand. Alex Freaky. Second eliminated, Alex ruffled feathers by telling the more experienced Patrick Clark that knowledge means nothing when it comes to pro wrestling, as the two were arguing. That comment got him pulled up by Daniel Bryan, though Alex maintains it was taken out of context and that he was the victim of the show's editing process. Either way, WWE didn't pan out and Alex went back to bodybuilding, acting, and personal training. He's currently a territory sales manager for Medtronic and has his own fitness supplement line. Hank Avery. Former Air Force football player Hank Avery Jr. was the first to go. He lives in Macon, Georgia with his wife and kids.